Hey podcast listeners, I am Taryn Elliott, Director of Client Success and Marketing at LISI, and I will be your host for this episode of LISI's All the Things podcast. On this week's episode, One More Thing, I chat with Ashely Gibbs, Director of Product Advisors at Litera, and Emilia Levisay, Director of Client Value Engagement at Ballard Spahr. We each share that one more thing we wished we could have discussed at the Follow Friday Mid-Career Professionals Summit Fishbowl Style discussion. While there is so much we could have talked about, we did discuss why you should figure out what you love to do early in your career, knowing when to take the next step in your career, or when to be content where you are, and the importance of learning who you are, how you show up, and what you want to accomplish. So here is one more thing, this week's episode of LISI's All the Things podcast. Check it out. Hello, everybody, and welcome to LISI's One More Thing podcast. I am Taryn Elliott, Director of Client Success and Marketing at LISI, and I am joined today by Ashely Gibbs and Emilia Levisay. And I will let you ladies introduce yourself, and then I will introduce what we're going to talk about real fast.
I will go first. My name is Ashely Gibbs. I'm the Director of Product Advisors at Litera, which is a legal software company.
And I'm Emilia Levisay. I am the Director of Client Value Engagement at Ballard Spahr, which is a AmLaw 100 law firm.
And we are together today. I'm actually really excited about this. We are doing a follow-up to the Follow Friday conference, which was just about a week and a half ago. And the three of us were lucky enough to participate in the Mid-Level Career Professionals Summit. And we really enjoyed the conversation we were having there. And of course, didn't feel like it was long enough for that time. And overall, the conference was just phenomenal. So putting the plug in now, it sounds like there will be a second annual Follow Friday conference in 2024. So if you weren't able to join us this year, I really hope that you can join us next year. But maybe this podcast will give you a little bit of a taste of some of the things that we were talking about when we were at Follow Friday. So the mid-level career professionals are, I don't even know that I loosely have the definition of that. I think it was somewhere between like 5 and 15 years.
Yeah. Well, yes. I know it made us feel a certain way that we were we were no longer rising stars. We've made it to that mid-career.
Yes. And but that's really flexible. There were people of all ages in that room,
100%.
and that was 100% the point. Like, you should be where you feel comfortable. And as a side note, I found interesting, as a group of women, I talked to several women who I was like, why are you in the mid-career professionals? You should be in the senior professionals, the senior leaders. And they're like, no, that's not for me. And I'm like, I think you're like underrepresenting your greatness.
Yeah.
Right.
No, 100%. And because the things we talked about in that room, and the enthusiasm, and like just the fast paced people wanting to come up to the table and have conversations, like those all felt very relevant to, I think, the three of us for sure. I think we probably are at the tail end of that, cutoff that we're talking about. So I could only imagine then what the senior career talked about, because I felt like our conversations were right there. But anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Well, the format of One More Thing is that whenever you give a presentation, or you're at a conference, or you're sitting on a panel like we were, there's always that one thing that you think of on the drive home, or that you just ran out of time because, it's a 45-minute presentation and, there was a lot to say. So this podcast gives people an opportunity to share that one more thing that they wanted to say. And so I will let Emilia go ahead and start with what her one more thing was that she just didn't get to share during our panel.
Well, kind of an aside too, the conference was so different in that there were times in other sessions that someone asked a question about something that was going on in their career. Nothing was specific to legal. It was people from all other industries. And this person got real-time feedback from every level in the room. Like I can't remember the question off the top of my head, but it was like everyone from someone who is starting, like entry level, was saying, I'm having a similar issue, to an executive who's like, well, this is how I overcome that, to a mid-level person being like, well, this is how, the day-to-day works if you want to, change your process. So I really, really loved the conference, which made me think, what is that one thing I wish we talked about? What is that one topic I wish we dug into? And it goes back to just career progression. Like, how did I get to where I am? How did we all get to where we are? And outside of just having really good people around me, truly just surrounding myself with, and really not even surrounding myself, but maybe, running behind some people that I really admired. I mean, I was, telling you both before, I started as a website marketing person at a car dealership right out of college. And now I work at
I don't know
a,
why that makes me giggle. I'm sorry to interrupt. I guess because I know you now, but anyway, go ahead.
it was
I
really
feel
good
the struggle is
experience.
real though. Like you graduate from college and you're like, I need a job. And you don't know what you don't know. And so
Right.
you're like, yes,
Exactly.
somebody wants to hire me and pay me and I can like start paying off my student loans or move out of my parents' house or whatever your thing is. You're just like, okay, here's
I
the
just
job.
get something. Well, and if I'm going to be really honest, my car broke down, which is the whole reason why I was in the car dealership, and it just, kind of spiraled from there.
And they looked at you and they thought, man, that woman looks like she could do some website work.
They had a advertisement, like a job description advertisement, saying they were hiring for this person, and I was like, I just graduated with a marketing degree. I've been throwing my resume everywhere. Why wouldn't I just throw it into this car
Did you
dealership?
try to
And,
negotiate free car repairs for like marketing help?
uh no, I think I got a free battery out of it though, so there was an
That's
upside.
not bad.
Yeah, no, I really appreciated that. And also I would plug them. It's a great dealership. Anyway. um, but I mean, getting from there to where I am now, sometimes like I feel like my brain just breaks. I'm like, how did I go from true, marketing, the daily marketing of sales, to, I mean, I think a little bit of branding yourself has to do with marketing, but now I work with product management, client account management. I'm really digging into process and technology automation. Like, how did I go from A to B? And I think for me, it goes back to, and really I'm plugging Robin Addis a little bit, who was my manager back in the day, just really understanding what you like and what you don't like. Because if you don't have those two kind of nailed down, you will be pushed into any direction. Like you can't guide yourself. You can't kind of have those like, if you're in a bowling lane, like those like little,
The
lanes
bumpers.
that you put in
Bumpers.
bumpers. Yeah. Because you can really get yourself in a position that you're like, I don't even like the stuff that I do half the time. How did I get
Yeah.
here? I think that's just not being kind of concrete in those two things.
I love that because so I'm going to take over because you've just inspired like a bunch of things that I want to say. So as I'm sitting here
Please
thinking,
do. Please do.
sure. As I'm sitting here thinking, what was my first quote unquote real job post graduation of college? Because I'd always waitressed or catered or bartendered, like, forever. And my first non food industry job, I sold, which is ironic, but I sold knives for Cutco. So I would like cold call and do demonstrations
Mhm.
and go to people's homes and convince them to buy these knives. And it was literally the worst thing of my life because the rejection and the awkwardness but if you think about what I do today, which is act as like a subject matter expert who leads demonstrations of products, it's actually pretty much of a light bulb moment that I just had. So there was that, and then going back to the waitressing piece, and then going back to giving Robin Addis a shout out, it was because of my relationship with her, she and I waitressed together, that she introduced me to a law firm, which then I can now see the career progression of starting at the law firm as an assistant and then building up to
Mhm.
gravitating towards more of the technology side of the house, and then having an amazing mentor in Kelly Anache, who, you know, really helped me harness that passion I had. To then, Emilia, I worked for a software company for a couple of years, and it was really hard, and I looked around and I'm like, geez, you know what, at the end of the day, I'm not enjoying 90% of the things that I'm doing. And being
Mhm.
able to say, okay, time to switch gears to see what else is out there, and then landing back where I am now that I love so much. So that's kind of my progression. I picked up my husband along the way at one of those jobs, actually, so that worked out too. I pick up friends and husbands. That's what I do when I go to work. Um, so anyway, that just inspired me because I can't believe the job that made me cry, which was these knife demonstrations. I'm actually kind of doing something similar today. Not crying though.
That is so,
That's
I
good.
mean, also waitressing, bartending, I think everyone should do that. Just also plugging that. I think that's a great
100%.
skill. But and I think some of those jobs that you end up, hating or kind of loathing after a while, that is such a blessing sometimes. Like you
Yes.
really figure out, oh, I hate this. I don't want to do that at all. I think the problem that I solve or see in my career progression is I just decided I was going to like everything for a while and not put too much of a, like a border around things that I like and I don't like. And I just became a generalist in everything. I was
Mm,
good at a lot of things, but
yeah.
and I was definitely a go-to for a lot of people, but to kind of the baseline. I wasn't, the expert that knew X, Y, and Z about this one thing. Like I just felt like I was kind of floating around and couldn't pick something until I finally figured out like this is what I like, this is what I want to go towards, and then, kind of like a North Star.
But I think that's important too,
Yeah.
because as you progress through understanding what else is happening or how, even at the basic level, how other people do their jobs is
Right.
important. Like my career path was fairly like I was a marketing coordinator at a bank and then was a marketing manager for a while and then a marketing director, always professional services. Um, and, I spent a decade doing marketing for law firms before I left legal completely, and then came back as a consultant. But I
Mm,
couldn't do my job now that I love so much more than any of the other jobs I've had if I hadn't worked in law firms. And I couldn't
yeah.
do the
Yeah.
specific parts of my job. I do a lot of different things and I still do marketing, but I'm definitely more focused on specific areas than when I was younger in my career. And I couldn't do that if I didn't understand what other people were doing and how we were building the big picture. And so I
Yeah.
think there's a little bit of also just laying the groundwork and laying the foundation. It's like a reverse funnel. So
Yeah,
that
you
way,
need to do that. You need to do all the you kind of need to be the generalist at first. You need to do
Yeah.
the jobs that, maybe other people don't want to do or just, pick up more um projects just because just to better understand. But I think I guess what I'm trying to kind of say is like you need to do all those things to, yeah, I guess reverse funnel, figure out and weed out those things that you don't like.
Hmm.
But it is tough. For early risers, I'm sure it's a lot of that conversation. Like, how do you get out of this? How do you get out of this job or this project or something you don't like?
Because it's hard, right? Because Amelia, the generalist piece sort of speaks to me because after my knife selling thriving career. I moved I moved over to, a stereotypical office setting. I was early 20s and I was an administrative assistant. So I did that for 2 years at a counseling center. Then I moved to be an executive assistant at a fitness center. And for those two jobs, I really became the expert in almost everything, but didn't have the focus in one thing. And I craved that so much because I could see that I could do more. And so in both instances, the one job I was at for 5.5 years, I finally, and that's when I actually, in working with Robin, was able to make the move over to the law firm because I was just like, this is never going to end. I can see
Right.
that I will always be everything to everyone. And it's upsetting because I do think that those positions in a company or a firm or what have you are really the backbone, but they don't get the right credit for
Absolutely.
that. And that bothered me. And I'm not ashamed to admit that that bothered me because I just felt that I could do more and have more of a focused position.
And I think there are definitely people for whom that role is really fulfilling, and it is like
100%.
their personality and who they are matches really well with that. So I
Hmm.
agree with you. I think it's the backbone as well. And I think that's more to the point of, not every job is for every person.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really, I don't know. I do think being able to identify the one thing that you enjoy, maybe it doesn't, not one thing, but just bear with me, the one thing that you enjoy and that really allows you to stand out. I think when you're in a position to identify what that is and then be supported by others around you to push you and allow you to be that one thing, I think that's probably where a lot of the satisfaction comes into play with a job. I feel like that's where I am now, and it took me a pretty long time to get here. So,
Well,
Yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
that transitions well. So, full disclosure, I know what Ashley's one more thing is. So, um, let's use that as your position now as the jumping off
yeah.
point for your one more thing.
So my one more thing, it's a topic that I wish we had gotten to simply because it was a crowdsourcing effort on my part. I wanted to hear from others in the room. It was my topic. And that topic is like, when is enough enough when it comes to where you've reached your spot in your career? So I'm assuming the majority of us started at an assistant level, whether it was at a car dealership or a knife selling situation, or a bank. And then over time, through the corporate structure, which I think the three of us have really worked in, we've had those levels that we've hit, right? Like assistant coordinator to senior coordinator to specialist to, all these different levels that are put into corporate or firm infrastructure to make us want to keep climbing. And the level that I always wanted to get to and felt that I had been at was that director level. And that's where I am now. I'm 100% satisfied. I'm not necessarily looking for anything else at this time, but I just sit back and think, okay, is this going to be enough? Am I going to be able to be happy in what I'm doing at the quote unquote level that I reached? Or is this going to be good for like 18 more months? And then I'm going to feel like, well, I should definitely be, the senior director or the VP or, whatever that ladder career rung will be wherever I'm at. And I just want to know, when does that end? Because it's exhausting. I simply just want to be happy and fulfilled in where I am, which I am, without having that maybe self-imposed pressure of needing to get to that next step. And so that was the one thing I wish I had been able to crowdsource. Like, has anyone just been like, yep, I'm good where I'm at and I'm done and I'm going to stay here?
That's so interesting. And I know we kind of talked about this before we started recording, and I didn't really think, and I was on the same page. But now I'm kind of thinking like, yeah, when is that enough, or when do you know when you should excel to that next step? And I think,
True.
because when you get to this goal place that you've had, for me, I'm a fairly young director. I've been in the role for probably a year now, So I'm really ready to like dig my heels in, expand my team, hone my craft a little bit, so
Own that title.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
And I'm excited for that. So I'm comfortable here, but I'm wondering if there's an opportunity, will I know to go for it? Will I know that this is the right next step? So it's kind of like two things. How do you know when you're good? And then also, how do you know when you should take that leap, especially when you're at this level, which is, director level, that means a lot in a lot of different
Yeah.
corporations. When you get to C-level, it's a little scary. It seems a
Yeah.
little
I don't want that. That sounds like a nightmare.
But
No, but you're right, because
Mhm.
and sorry, Taryn, just one
No, you're
thing.
fine.
Because Emilia, I agree. I've been at this job for a year, and I feel like I can finally sort of swim without floaties. And so this
Right.
next year, I'm really excited to use your words, like dig in and hone my craft. And yeah, like when is it like, well, I just want more because I want more, because it's been 2 years, so I deserve something, versus,
Mhm.
I've actually grown enough and learned enough, and I'm looking at, whomever above me is doing their thing. And it's like, yeah, I think I'm ready to start to climb up to there and see what that view is. And it's funny because a mutual friend of ours, who shouldn't be named, um, a vice president position opened at my current company, and that friend was like, "Where are you going to apply?" And I like almost threw up. I was like, "No." I was like, "I'm nowhere near qualified for that." So it's like, when is it? When are you being self-deprecating, right? When are you being like, "Oh, I couldn't do that." Sort of like what we talked about at the conference,
Mhm.
like, "Oh, if women don't match 99% of a job description, we won't
Yes.
apply," right? So when is it that? And when is it just being honest and just saying, like, no. And I'm okay with the fact, and I'm okay with the fact that I'm not going to apply for a VP position. But
Well,
I wonder what it'll look like when I am.
I do think like the secret to getting to the end of your mid-career and into the beginning of your senior leader part of your career is, one, you figure out that while there are a lot of really amazing leaders and really intelligent people in leadership positions, like you actually also figure out that they're also just normal people. And it's
Yes.
not like
Yeah.
there's like when you're 22 starting out, you're like, oh my gosh, they walk on water. And then at 43, I can say, like, I know some of them, and I'm like, oh, well, they're great at their job, but I don't know that they have anything in their toolkit that I don't have.
Yeah.
Maybe they have a few more years experience, or maybe they have a
Hmm.
different, maybe they took a different path, but they're not like Albert Einstein brilliant, or you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like at a
Yeah.
certain point, you realize people are just people.
Yeah.
But
They have flaws, they have insecure, as we learned a week and a half
yes,
ago, we all have the same insecurities, all of us.
um,
We're not
but
unique in any way.
Nope.
well, and I
Really, it
think
comes down to how we style our hair at the end of
Right.
the
Right. And even that, I go off of a picture of somebody else.
day. Yeah, for sure.
that's generally the easiest way I find to do it, which is what you
Yeah.
do in work too sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
ooh,
Yeah.
that was a good idea. How can I translate that to what I do, and how can I own that
Hmm.
for my company or my role? I don't mean copying things, like, but that's what we talk
No,
about all the time. What are people
inspiration.
doing in other industries? What is happening, and how can we think of a way to translate that into what we are doing for ourselves or for our clients? So, which
Well, and not to
that's what the
backtrack and
people at the top are doing too.
Yeah.
well, but just to plug the conference again, I feel like that's what I got out of that day. Were ideas. I mean,
Mhm.
Emilia, you and I were in that first session of the day where, and maybe this is what you were talking about before. Folks, I forget what it was. We were talking about negotiating salary, and we
Mm.
just sat around the room and shared ideas with certain folks that are younger in career as to how they can prepare for that conversation or
Yeah.
prepare for their business case. And it was just, idea sharing. And not one of them was this magic recipe that, we needed a key to unlock. It was just, sometimes it was common sense that we just hadn't thought of yet. Sometimes it was like a really good tip. That's what I most got out of the day, was just listening and writing things down and being like, oh, good idea. And Emilia, I know you and I have yet to schedule it, but I know we want to make sure we connect to share ideas at our level of how to support our team. And anyway, follow Friday 24, book it.
I know. I'm very excited for that. I think, and I keep like thinking about this too, when do you know when to progress? I'm in a very interesting spot, and I don't know if either of you see this too, but my direct manager, who's a C-level, oversees 4 other teams that I don't really have a ton to do with. One team, sure, I could man. I'm just thinking like in the future, if I were to be
Yeah.
her, if that's my career progression, there's one team, sure, I could probably manage. There's another team I probably wouldn't know that much about, but I could probably swing it if I really was thoughtful and learned, what they did day to day. The 4th team, I'm like, it would take me so long to understand what they do on a day to day. Like how do you just manage that many different?
But there's a difference between knowing how to do everything and being a good manager.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, I think, part of that. And I think understanding, I have a little bit of an answer to Ashley's question, which is the one thing we didn't get to. But I'll get to that in a second. But I think for a lot of people, the answer to that question, and this is not everyone, and I don't think this is probably either of the two of you, but I think at a certain point for a lot of people, the answer to that question is, do I want to manage people, or can I manage people, or am I good at managing people, or do I find it exhausting managing people? And I think, or how big of a team do I feel comfortable managing? So I think for some people, if you're like I have a friend who is like, I don't want to manage people. I just want to do my job, and I want to do my job the best that I can, or maybe I want to do my job in a different department, but I don't want to manage people. And then I know other people who they were put on this earth to be a good manager to teams. And they're the kind of people who also might know I want to move up and I want to manage even more people.
Yeah.
So I think some of that is part of it too. It's not necessarily that you need to be able to go in and do everybody on your team's job. You need to understand what they do, but you also need to know how to manage a team that can perform.
Well, I was just going to say, Taryn, I mean, Emilia, your boss ultimately has 4 brilliant leaders, and that's where your boss probably caps what they need to know, right? They know they have 4 of you. And so they've hired well, to Taryn's point, their management. And so then they can continue to look forward, knowing that you guys have everything that's in the present covered. So I'm 100% not diminishing, because I think you're right. If I think, when going back to my friend saying, well, should you apply for the VP job? And me spitting, it's like, no, no. Because I do think that we feel that means, I know I take this on myself. I think I have to know literally every single thing about the X in order to be successful. And that's just not true. And I think that's where we limit ourselves, because going back to if I don't match 99.9% of this job description, I can't apply.
Generalist mindset still in the back of my brain a little bit. You need to know a little bit about everything.
Just a sprinkle, just what the goals are and how it maybe relates up to the company's overarching strategy or the firm's overarching strategy. And here I am talking with such confidence again, there's no way I would even think about doing that. But I think that's probably the trick, is having the right team.
Well, and the other thing, the one more thing I was going to get to, I think the other thing is, when you're in your 20s, you have a new job, you're just trying to figure out how to be a good employee, how to do your job, or in that case, how to do every possible aspect that somebody might have to do in marketing, because that's just kind of the role and that's kind of the time. And then generally in your 30s, you start adding in
mortgages and families, or maybe you're caring for, your parents, or
Mm.
you get really involved in a charitable organization. And so I feel like in your 30s is kind of when you start figuring out balance, and you start thinking about the fact that my life is more than just my career. And I applaud all 20-year-olds who figure that out from day one. But for me, in my journey, and I've seen this with a lot of people, men and women, I felt like the end of my 30s, which was also it's also generally the end of that mid-career point, is when I figured out who I was, like how I show up at work, like how my insecurities manifest themselves in my job and at home, how I show up for my husband, how I show up for my parents, how I show up for my kids, how I show up when I volunteer, how I show up with my coworkers, how I show up with my bosses. Like I don't want to say I figured all that stuff out. I do not have all the answers. But I started to really, and part of it was the job I had at the time, which wasn't the job for me long term, but I learned so much, about
Yeah.
who I am and how I go through the world, and how that informs the work I do or the work that I don't want to do. And, a big part of that for me was also figuring out what my boundaries were around being for me. And I know not everybody has this, but like what my boundaries were around work and family. So that was the point where, I started out and I'm like, I'm going to be a chief marketing officer of like Procter and Gamble. And then I was like, okay, I mean, maybe I'll be like a chief marketing officer for a large law firm. And at a certain point, I realized that for me, that wasn't the answer. That wasn't what I wanted to do, because I wanted to make sure that I was still, because of what I wanted to accomplish, volunteering with my kids' schools, or, just being a parent, and like for me, like my spouse is the opposite. Like you say like, well, what's enough? And for him, I can tell you what the role is he wants to get. And I can also tell you that when he gets there, he will be like, all right, well, how do I make this even bigger? I mean, it won't be immediately, but like, I
Yeah.
think some people
That's
are
just
like
who
that.
he
Even when
is.
you get to the top,
Right.
you're like, can I expand this? Can I, like add things? And so that's what I really would encourage people to do, is spend some time, whether it's taking disc assessments or working with an executive coach or talking with your friends,
Mhm.
and just really figuring out who who you are and how you want your journey to progress. And that's not to say that like you can't pivot, or that you have to
Yeah,
have it
and
all
I don't
figured
think that's
out. And
linear too. Is the way you're
yeah.
describing it. I feel like in my, when my professional meets my personal, I'm kind of skipping from what you're saying, like the 20s, you're figuring out how to be an employee. So I'm like skipping that. Like I also have, uh, responsibilities outside of work, to how do I show up at work? Because
Mhm.
I mean, for a lot of people now, like I'm a renter, I'm a single renter, dog mom life, but like I don't have a lot of responsibilities outside of that. So now I'm trying to figure out, how do I show up at work? Because this is what I care about. This is, how do I show up to obviously my friends and family, but how am I showing up at work, and like being seen as a director who people can go to, and kind of knows the business, knows what's going on. So I think I'm kind of like, I'm probably going to jump around. I don't think it's
Mhm.
always that linear, but absolutely there's definitely those segments that happen.
It's funny because at my last job, I have a very, very good friend, and I consider him younger me, and we make that joke. Like he's like, "Oh, older me," and I'm like, "Oh, younger me," and he's 29. He's brilliant and he's an amazing worker. Like he's just like something you've never seen. And I see the stresses that he has today in his career, and I think back to when those stressors used to be mine, and now I don't even think about some of the things that he is, that gets him in a tizzy. And I just think, oh, buddy, don't worry. Just wait. Just wait. Like, I
Right.
promise you, you're
Mhm.
not going to be worrying about those 15 years from now, which is our age difference. But I can't kind of beat that into him because he has to have those realizations himself and be able to let go. So it is just funny because in this topic, Emilia, I have a similar situation to you. I am married. I don't have a dog, but we don't have kids. So a lot of me is really, I get a lot of my satisfaction from work and how I show up to work. But I'm doing it differently than I was in my 29-year-old self. Like, I'm still just
Yeah.
as hard as a worker and really always making sure that I give everything I can, but I'm doing it in different areas. And I'm stepping back. Like, I'm not trying to solve every single one of the company's or the firm's problems, which is what I was doing back then, because I don't need to, right? Like, I have a very specific function. I want to make sure that the train I'm driving is operating very well, and I'm not going to necessarily bog myself down with other areas unless there's a way I can help. And I feel like that's very much who I was before, and it's just exhausting. But
Right.
I think having those sort of values in your younger years does help determine where you're going to be, 15 years later. And I'm very happy with where I am. So,
But I think understanding those things now is also what makes you gut reaction be like, no, I'm not applying for that vice president job. That's not what I want
yeah,
right
and
now.
I'm cool with
Yeah.
that.
And
Yeah.
maybe in 5 years or 3 years or who knows where those turns end up taking, you'll be like, okay, now I am, because I know these things about me. So I think a little bit is just understanding that, like, you don't need to stress out about it. You'll figure,
Mhm.
if you know yourself and you know like what you do and your strengths and your weaknesses and what you like
Oh, being
Yeah.
hopefully when you get
selective
to that
about
point,
what,
you'll just be like, okay, this is the right
yeah.
move.
Understanding what to stress out about and not to stress out about is such a
Yes,
skill. It's such a learned
it is.
skill for years and years and years that I don't ever think anyone perfects, but it is helpful to know what to stress out about and what to kind of, let go and let God. It's just going to happen
Yeah.
whether he can control it or not.
Yeah. No, 100%. This
Well,
is such an enlightening
I
morning,
know.
Taryn. Thank you.
I know. Thank
Starting off
you
my
so
week.
much.
yes, we are recording this on a Monday morning, even though it
Yes.
won't air until a
First thing.
Friday afternoon. But a lot of big thoughts here for a Monday morning. And I know this is a topic we could talk about for probably another hour. I mean, part of me was like, maybe we should just have a series once a month. We'll do a check-in.
We
Um,
should.
and I will think about that because I have learned that podcasting is one of my favorite parts of my job. So
Oh, awesome.
That's
um,
And
great.
I just love, talking nonstop and making people forced to listen to me. So it works
I
out.
actually think that might be my motivation. I'm not lying. I think that might be part of it. And this topic is really near and dear to me because it's something everyone struggles with. And, it's, so I think we can learn so much from each other. But I also want to respect both of your time and all of our listeners' time. So I want to thank both of you so much, both for your work at Follow Friday and for participating in this podcast episode today. A lot of really great things. I hope, it gives people a lot, not just to think about, but to kind of like start figuring out, what's right for them and for the path that they want to take, or to help them build out that path. And thank you so much to our listeners for tuning into this episode of One More Thing. And join us almost every Friday at 12:30. We have a live stream on LinkedIn. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
You have been listening to All the Things, the podcast from Legal Internet Solutions Incorporated, where we bring you all the things. Whether it's 3 things we learned, hearing from a legal marketing insider, an Ask Me Anything session, or that one more thing we've been dying to tell you all month long but couldn't. That's all the things. Our next episode will be out in a week wherever you get your podcasts. And you can join us for the live events every Friday at 12:30 Eastern on our LinkedIn channel for our live stream where we bring you all the things live.